My name is Sue-Ann Barrett. I'm a member of the faculty here at IGDS, and it is my great pleasure to welcome my colleague, Mr. Nikoli, soon to be Dr. Nikoli Attai, longtime colleague from Prince Karamak, but we're not going down there. Formally, Nikoli is a PhD student at the Women and Gender Studies Institute at the University of Toronto. And he's visiting with us as a research student at IGDS St. Augustine while he's conducting his fieldwork on LGBT organizing in Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Barbados, and Jamaica. Nikoli completed a Master of Philosophy here at St. Augustine campus in Cultural Studies, and he was supervised by our current head, Dr. Gabriel Hossain. He submitted his thesis, Trans TNT, an investigation of transgender identities and communities in Trinidad and Tobago. And Nikoli continues with this work, and it is embedded in his three main research interest areas: trans communities in Trinidad and Tobago and the region, politics of belonging for sexual and gender minorities in the Caribbean, and gay carnival tourism in Trinidad and Tobago, the point that we'll be departing from today. It is a great pleasure, and I'll turn the floor over to Nikoli, who's very much embedded and involved and passionate about this topic.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by the support, but I'm sure that will be a very supporting and exciting environment this afternoon. Right, so I just want to start by playing back that song that we were hearing in the background. Two songs, just two clips to kind of frame the discussion, right? So keep that in the back of your head as we go through. Right, we can start. So remember those two songs, right? Hooligan, Vagabond, and I Come Out to Play. Remember that as we go along. So again, good afternoon. Let me just firstly say thank you for coming, and also thank you to the IGDS for providing this opportunity for me to share my work and get some feedback from everyone, and also for making IGDS home for me for the past few years as an MPhil student between 2009 and 2013, and now as a visiting PhD student. It's always good to come to IGDS and interact with my mentors, colleagues, students. As you know, we just talk about just a wide range of intersecting issues. It's always good to have the space to to interact with people like Amilka. Right?
Just Amilka?
Yes, I just put louding them up. Yeah, struggling with it. And secondly, I just want to also acknowledge my power as a researcher in telling the stories of the gay men that I discussed this afternoon. And while the presentation will be very exciting and fun, we may laugh at times, and I just want us to be mindful of the sometimes unfortunate circumstances that greet some non-heterosexuals in Trinidad and also in the region. And I encourage all of us to continue to fight against homophobia, misogyny, patriarchy, and all these forms of control that prevent us from realizing our fullest potential. Right? So I'll get into the presentation. This thing does work. Right. So the presentation today is really a part of a larger project that will feature in my PhD dissertation, and is also a chapter that is currently under review in the publication Carnival, Culture and Tourism, which is edited by Dr. Violet Coffey, who's a lecturer in tourism at the Queen Margaret University in Scotland. So I'm hoping that this will be out sometime later this year. And the title this evening is very provocative, Bullerman Carnival. And what I'll do today is just provide a brief overview of the project. Then I will just speak quickly about some of my research methods and the theories that guide the study. And then finally, I would talk about the three main themes that emerge in this ethnographic study. Right, so I'll just jump quickly straight into the project overview. So what I want to do with this piece is make a queer intervention in tourism discourse. And I know the term queer is a contested term in the region, but I see queer quite literally as being odd, as disrupting and stuff. And as many of us may know, tourism scholarship is quite conservative and quite quantitative. So a study like this is, I hope, will be a breath of fresh air to provide something more grounded in actual experience. And my goals are twofold. So what I do, I firstly examine literature, popular tourism literature on like festival and carnival tourism. Carnival tourism is a fairly newly emerging field in terms of this type of scholarship. So I'm happy that I could contribute to the discussions that are currently happening. And then I divert attention from a kind of unilateral discussion of the voyeuristic white outsider who comes to the region to access the bodies, the people, the beaches, the sex in the region, to think about how Caribbean gay men actively participate as tourists in our tourist economies and in the carnival space in Trinidad. And I do this also to draw attention to the close connections to home that a lot of the gay men maintain as they move in the region, outside the region and back. And I think that this is important, as we continue to engage this relationship between tourism, diaspora, and identity. So to do this, I consider three main questions. So I ask, how do gay carnival tourists resist prevailing heteronormativity? What do their stories tell of redefining, although temporarily, respectability boundaries? And how are these tourist accounts connected to resistance that has traditionally framed discussions around Trinidad and Tobago Carnival? So I'll just give you an idea of who the participants are. In my work, I like to give people the space to speak. So through the presentation, you'll be hearing their voices and stuff. So we have Harris, who is a returning national from New York, Alista from Jamaica, Keegan from Tobago, Jude from Guyana, Nathan from Aruba, Dex from Barbados, and Charlie from Jamaica. I was happy to get Keegan's input, because although being from Tobago, we know that Tobago, brings a completely or an interesting dynamic to our relationship or our as a nation. So in this ethnographic piece, I used data collected during carnival celebrations between 2013 and 2015 at prominent gay parties, Juve festivities, the parade of bands, and other mainstream fetes. So interviews are conducted during this time, and to help me understand the experiences of these 7 men who all identify as gay. And as we see here, most were tourists from other islands, but one a returning national who lived in New York, and then Keegan from Tobago. I also conducted some online ethnography on social media sites like Facebook, and also dating sites like Adam Fadam and Grindr. Some of us may know these sites, right? And I must say that all participants provided consent for me to use their stories in the project. In the interest of time, I won't spend much time on the literature that I use in the current literature out there on the topic, but I just want to flag some 1 or 2 points. So firstly, as I said earlier, the tourism scholarship is generally very conservative, right? So this piece attempts to make an intervention by being quite radical and upsetting things a little bit, right? Also, a lot of the critical scholarship talks about decolonizing construction of the region by outsiders. So we have people like Mimi Sheller, who talks about how Caribbean people have been deeply inscribed into particular gender, racial, and moral orders. Wesley Critchlow talks about, he argues that the region has been repackaged and fetishized as a land for consumption by voyeurs of the exotic other. Kamala Kempadu talks about how the hypersexual black male stud and the hot body brown or black woman in tourist destinations are attractive to heterosexual tourists because of their alluring machismo and lasciviousness. On the other hand, we also have this construction of the region, of this paradise, to use this problematic word, as very dangerous for non-heterosexuals who also desire these bodies when they come for vacation and for their pleasure. And this narrative has been perpetuated by discourse coming out of North America, Europe, and stuff that, paints the region as very dangerous for the liberated queer outsider who comes to the region. Additionally, Jasper Power noted in 2002 that there has not been much extended analysis of queer consumption in the region, and today we have few interventions on the experiences of gay men in the region. So we have Mark Padilla, who in 2008 wrote about the Caribbean pleasure industry and the maintenance of a marketable fantasy of homoeroticism in the Dominican Republic, and David Murray, who tries to discuss the interactions between Bajan queens and outsiders and the kind of predatory nature of these sex tourists who go to Barbados looking for gay men. We could talk about these works after if there's anything, right? I just want to jump quickly into the theoretical framework for this study, and then we could move into the fun part. So, for this study, I use the work of people like Kamala Kempadu, Ian Strachan, and Mimi Sheller to think about this colonizing construction of the region and how it affects the interactions between visitors and locals. And later in the presentation, we'll see how these Caribbean men also fetishize each other, and how this kind of colonization is embedded in us. Then I use Jasper Poir's work to think about queer consumption and how Trinidad and Tobago, as she argues, becomes this place, this playground, as she calls it, for affluent gays. I also look at Rosamund King's work to think about how carnival spaces, as she argues, provide an opportunity to espouse non-hegemonic values and to parody the sexualities that people have been practicing throughout the year. And then I put all these in conversation with our very own Dr. Nixon's theory of resisting paradise in order to make messy these sides of what I call playing, as I work towards an idea, a theory of what I call calibrated resistance. Right? So as I go through the presentation, I will draw on these discussions to try to bring everything together. I just want to spend a little time to talk about resisting paradise and how I used it in the work and how I conceptualize gay carnival tourism as resistance. So Nixon theorizes resistance as the creation of alternative models which change the way that people think about tourism and identity. She argues that these cannot be entrenched in racism, sexism, heterosexism, class exploitation, and embodied consumption, and are necessary to resist the selling of paradise and the consumption of bodies through tourism. An exploration of gay carnival tourism provides a useful context to this argument, revealing how gay tourists actively resist the dominant identity politics through their public displays of gay sexual autonomy. And this concept has been this concept of carnival as an important site of resistance has been fairly well explored. So Keith Nurse argues that regional carnivals provide a moment for carnival consumers to engage in what he calls rituals of social protest. And one such demonstration we could see is the men partaking in festivities wearing female clothing like during Juve celebrations especially nightgowns, dresses, bras, in a reenactment of stereotypical femininity. Rosamund King also explores this historical and cultural significance of the parody in the context of the Jamet women, who were poor urban black women cross-dressing as European white men during Carnival. And she argues that, that they were not only parodying their pomposity, but were also impersonating their power. So in this context of gay carnival tourism in Trinidad and Tobago, I see resistance through the ways that these gay men occupy carnival space as a mechanism of temporarily and symbolically subverting the heteronormative power relations that usually define heterorespectability and citizenship. In these moments, they disrupt the idea of a homophobic paradise that the groups, a lot of human rights groups in the North push, and they disrupt this idea that prevents gay tourists from actively occupying space. They also present a method to transform assumptions about sexual autonomy while being protected by the revelry of festivities. So in the discussion that follows, I engage with this deployment of resistance by gay men, and I think this is important in order to consider how Carnival allows us to actively resist the heteronormativity through the networks and the activities that we engage in. So these gay men are unlike traditional reenactments of non-normativity that people like the Jamet women that King discusses, or the travestis macume that Aga Jones discusses in the context of Martinique and Carnival. They are actual people with real non-heterosexual identities who push against boundaries of respectability in the carnival space. Right, so I'll move forward now into the ethnographic discussion, looking at the three emerging themes. So the themes that arise are: one, carnival networks and avenues for participating in gay carnival, networking and finding gay men in carnival spaces, and the pinnacle of homoeroticism, parties, the road and transgression. The second theme I actually wanted to title it, you can find a Bullerman anywhere in our fet, but the editor felt as if it was a bit too harsh, so I had to settle for something a bit more palatable. So Trinidad and Tobago's tourism ministry estimated that 126,357 tourists visited between 2010 and 2012. But these statistics stop short of finding out what kind of activities that tourists participate in. And while it might be possible to collate this information from these tourists, but I want to go a little further and say that it is impossible to figure out what the non-heterosexual tourists are doing. And I say this in the context of the Immigration Act, which prevents homosexuals from entering the country. The Immigration Act, Chapter 18, Section 1E. So, from this standpoint then, no gays are entering, and therefore no gays are participating in Carnival. Right, but the stories that I will share, say differently, right? It tells that, gays boast of that one time when they could engage in uninhibited revelry in the fetes or on the streets. Or as Harris explained, the road march is one place that masqueraders get to free up and let loose without a care in the world. Over the years, fetes have grown in size and offerings. We have the all-inclusive fetes, we have the cheaper ones, we have a lot of gay fetes happening, and a lot of the gay tourists go to, they plan their events around these fetes. So these fetes typically happen in and around Port of Spain, and the gay fetes happen under the radar of mainstream society. So you have to be in the know to take full advantage of them. So Keegan explains this to me. Girl, you can find all kind of places for the host of fete, for Carnival. Me are bound to go to none of them straight parties for the butchness and to rough up hoes. It have one or two around the savannah, right by the stage. It have one up in by club. It have by, which was once a big street club, and Bohemia is like the god of them all. When you see we getting the hot Bohemia on street and strip down on your panty, we just have them hot. Once you have your things and you know where the things happening, you just have to get in and have fun. right? So many of these events happen in close proximity to other mainstream fetes. So while I was doing research, one thing to know, there were no reports of any kind of danger to the patrons who partied in close proximity. So one example is the International Soca Monarch Festival, which happens at Jean Pierre Complex. So in 2013, there was also a popular gay party happening right next door, right in a building close by. And at the party, I could see patrons wearing their Soca Monarch wristbands plus the wristbands for the gay parties, and they moved back and forth. Two contestants from the Soca Monarch competition also came across to the gay party to perform some songs after they competed in Soca Monarch. And I think that this kind of spillover tells a real nice story of how mainstream and subculture merge through a fluid negotiation of boundaries. One participant, Jude, said that he preferred the action that Soca Monarch provided, and then he chose to wind down, how we call it in Trinidad, right? And wind down with the gays after he taking all the action and stuff. In the paper, I also discussed how some of the gay patrons went to Soca Monarch and how they were able to create a safe space in Soca Monarch with their friends, with women and stuff, and how they were able to interact with other men in that space. But I wouldn't touch on that now. And I think a very important aspect of this kind of tourism is the transnational network that gay men create in order to participate in the activities. So prior to arrival, most of the visitors already make connections with locals and other friends to pre-plan their stay. All these men emphasize this importance in order to ensure that they had the best experience possible. So for instance, Dex attended his first carnival in 2010 as a participant in a popular drag queen pageant. And before, he joined private online communities on Facebook and learned about the local drag pageant scene and the reputations, to quote him, that Bajans had for representing in the dance. Nathan also relied on his online connections to assist him with securing cheap accommodation and information about the best gay parties happening. So he explained that upon arrival, tourists, especially those who are returning, reconnected with their friends and began the festivities almost immediately. Some used popular dating sites like Adam Fadam and Grindr to meet locals and other visitors. So I have a little snapshot here of one interaction between a participant and somebody on Grindr. So we can see here Bajan asking, how things going. The conversation goes on. Cool, can I visit you? Will you be able to host me? Then he asks when you come in for Carnival, and then they go on to talk about, well, we'll keep in touch. And the conversation went in other directions, but for for today's purposes, I will stop here, right? And I'll talk about that a bit now. So while these sites are generally popular among gay men for sexual encounters, they also serve a different purpose. So Amalia Cabezas argues that these interactions cultivate relationships and create identities in relationships that move beyond an alignment with sex. These transnational and transregional networks ought not to be underestimated, as they provide an important avenue for gay visitors to prepare for and participate in the country's gay carnival tourism, as, to borrow from Nixon, as different kinds of tourists. So unlike the typical tourist discourse disseminated via conventional mass media and stuff, they learn about the ins and outs of the festivities long before they arrive, through social media and other underground networks of peers across the islands. This I conceptualize as a dynamic interactive network that allows gays to communicate and participate across geographic, physical, social, and cultural boundaries in order to facilitate this active participation. Every year, put this up by time for it to soak in when I talk. Every year, soca artists release exciting songs. We live for the new releases, right? And then we forget what they sang last year. And generally, popular divas like Destra and Nadia Batson will be favorites among the bullers, the gay men. I mean, I use the terms bullers and stuff because that is what people like to call themselves, right? I privilege these local identity markers. But in 2015, Ricardo Drew's song, so I was playing Ricardo Drew a bit at the starting, was a popular exception. So he sung Vagabond. And this became a popular anthem for many of the gay men in the fetes. So the song was played at fetes, both straight and gay. And gay men made it their own. So the song, Drew's song say, the way that I jamming in the band, they call me a hooligan. The way that I whine on every girl, they call me a vagabond. So the Bullers now change it up and said the way that I jamming in the band, they call me a Bullerman. The way that I whine on every man, they call me a Bullerman. So you go to the fetes, the gay parties, you hear them, chanting it and, celebrating the sexuality. So while the original song called on patrons to become hooligans and vagabonds, the gay men switched these words to exclaim that their behavior sent a signal to others that they were Bullermen. This scenario is possible because, as Agar Jones argues, the queer figure is afforded particular visibility in Carnival. This visibility helps gay men to signal their presence to each other. Alistair was initially afraid of being noticed as gay at his first Carnival fete, but this fear was soon alleviated when he could quickly recognize others in the party that in the seemingly straight crowd. So he explains to me, gays have a presence, and it's like he could tell who is who in a fete. When I walked in, I saw a lot of muscular men in shorts and tank tops, and was like, these men look a little suspicious. But they look very tough, so I didn't think much about it. Later in the fete, after the drinks started to soak in, and this was a drinks-inclusive fete, so we were drinking a lot, I could notice that these men were liming alone and dancing in a kind of suggestive way. Some of them were squatting and bubbling like Tedestra, while others were winding up their waists like women. We inched up to them slowly and tried to make eye contact, and after a while, we were able to line with them. Alistair was able to pinpoint men by their dancing, but Keegan explained that he could spot a Bullerman from a mile, right? By the way they react to the soca songs. So this is where I wanted to get the title from, right? But they say no. So in 2014, we attended a popular fete hosted by a group known to attract a crowd of young liberal professionals. Once we got there, he immediately began to point out men he knew or suspected to be gay. Look, she, always playing butch, but you will see she's singing every last word of Destra like she write it. And then she go be by the toilet peeping man. And that other one, well, she like pure woman. These displays are possible in the carnival space in these seemingly straight fetes because it affords gay men an opportunity to come out and play in environments that are less rigidly policed. Or to borrow from Patricia de Freitas, gay men no longer have to behave in accordance with the tenets of respectability expected of them by the society at large in these moments. Scholars like Rosamund King have written extensively on how transgressive sexualities are allowed such freedom and facilitated, to quote her, a disrupting of gendered and raced, social, political, and economic hierarchy in Trinidad. In 2013, for Juve, this provided a good context to think about how the space is facilitated. I could see men in the nightgowns, in the wigs, and stuff. They also padded their clothes to exaggerate female breasts and bottom and stuff. In an overt reenactment of a stereotypical hyper-femininity. The occupation of feminine tropes was mobilized by the hyper-masculine context of their performance, and their cross-dressing remained safe and acceptable because of an expectation that these reenactments would end once the celebrations ceased. But this environment also provided a space for the gay men to transgress. So, for example, many of us stormed a popular Juve band in Port of Spain, and there seemed to be little concern among the masqueraders that some of us wore suggestive clothing. So that morning, Keegan wore a pair of fitted black boy shorts with pride color trimmings, and was unfazed by the possibility of being noticed as gay. He recalled, "This is the time to let loose and enjoy yourself. When all of us get dirty, nobody's studying who is what." And in addition to being able to transgress, many men were also afforded additional freedom because of the types of events that they attended. Being financially able facilitated a particular interaction and experience during Carnival, and it exposes an economically mobile class of traveling gays to the underworld of gay carnival tourism. Supporting this view, Charlie explained to me, many gays cannot afford to experience the gay side of Trinidad Carnival, But those of us who are well off enough can find a way to fly to Trinidad at least see the gay side of the festivities. I make sure and save enough money to attend at least one or two all-inclusive fests, which usually cost me about 300 US, and then the gay parties are usually cheaper, like about 20 US or so. So with an expensive plane ticket and accommodation, I usually spend about 1,200 to 1,500 US when I come. Apart from being able to pay these hefty prices and attend these various fests, tourists also typically bring financial and material benefits with them. Some of the men, like Harris, explained, so Harris came from New York, that he would often help friends pay for events en masse and bring fashionable clothes for them in exchange for accommodation and getting to the parties. In this regard, the tourist-local relationship mimics that in other tourist economies like sun, sand, and sex tourism, where locals benefit from the remittances of visitors. These contemporary processes of globalization, Padilla explains, reconfigure the ways that men interact materially, socially, and sexually with other men. So the third and final theme, the pinnacle of homoeroticism, parties, road, and transgression. In this section, I focus on how this local tourist relationship exposed the hypersexualized and homoerotic zones for gay men to come out and play. I argue that many gay tourists sometimes come to Trinidad expecting to fulfill an erotic fantasy as part of what Maria Tornquist calls a sensual geography made up of transnational skin-to-skin intimacy. Stories from participants like Charlie solidify this idea. He learned very quickly on his first visit that the locals wanted his big Jamaican hood, while he was also looking for the coolie boy them who have high sex drive. Likewise, Jude looked forward to seeing the Caribbean men stripped down in places like Bohemia so that he could see all the lovely cocks swinging. So in this section, I analyze how popular soca songs set the stage for observing this very sexualized and erotic atmosphere. And for example, in 2014, I'm sure some of us here will remember Benjai's hit song "Come Out to Play," which was popular among men, both gay and straight. And in many fests that year, patrons anticipated his headline performance that often ended with him stripping down into his underwear, making his penis the focal point of the act. Right? Let me give you a quick glimpse of one of Benjai's performances. This was Soca Monarch semi-finals in 2014. Right, so we see Benjai doing his little thing there, right? Well, thing. That little thing. We may be able to debate what kind of thing it is. Right? So, I argue here that while the song itself is void of sexual innuendo, an emphasis on his penis restored on one hand a phallic black Trinidadian masculinity, while also evoking a homoerotic gaze that called on male patrons to participate in a communal acknowledgement of their virility and hypersexuality. Keegan was always excited to see this performance and quipped about how, to quote him, lovely Benjai will swing his penis from side to side in time with the lyrics. So when he sang "I come out to play," the penis would just dangle and sway as he moved. In many of these fests, I could see women rushing to touch Benjai's crotch while he sang and whined. But more interestingly, many men stood close by and zoned in as well. Some even mimicked his moves and stripped down to their underwear. That year I attended Bohemia. There's a picture from one of the popular stage at Bohemia. So Bohemia is probably one of the most prominent fests for gay men, which happens on Carnival Sunday night. And it's a very hyper-erotic, free atmosphere. Free in all senses of the word, right? This party was hosted in a middle-class area in Port of Spain, which is known for attracting gays and sex workers and stuff. And it seemed open to the public. I was just able to go in, and other people were just walking in and liming out in front and taking in the action. At many points during the party, Benjai's song blasted, and the DJ encouraged patrons to stand on the stage to show them how they played. Dex was excited about this, as he thought it was a good time to, quote, show them what Bajans got and to measure up the islands. Right? You know, the idea where he going with that, right? So he explained to me, when the DJ called on each island to represent, I was front and center to see the men in the draws. Jamaica, Trinidad, Grenada, Barbados, and ooh, child, it was nice. When they played the song and the men started to strip down, it was nice. So I think about these interactions through Ian Strawn's argument that the Caribbean man is supposedly beast-like, an object of sexual fantasy, the site of devious promiscuity. He is portrayed as a walking phallus, waiting to insert itself into the tourist orifice. And all in time with the rhythm of the waves, this case the music, washing against the beach on a clear night. In these above accounts, the men focus heavily on how their eroticization fueled much of their interactions with other men. Such fetishization reinforces the idea of the Caribbean as a hypererotic space available for consumption by locals and outsiders, where, as Scheller reminds us, exoticization of the black slave body and untouched paradise have continued to color contemporary gazes through tourism and popular culture. For me, this signals that colonized bodies have continued to innately embody and reproduce these sexualized markers that continuously invade our psyche. Such internalization of Caribbean hypersexuality by regional tourists who are also themselves hypersexualized brings us back to Nixon's argument that the construction of paradise is so powerful a fantasy and tourist product that different kinds of tourists participate in exploitative consumption of the Caribbean. This homoeroticism is also evident in the revelry of mass on Monday and Tuesday. For many gay men, the road becomes the pinnacle of their gay experience. And over the years, mass bands have gained a reputation for attracting more gay masqueraders. So in 2014, Harris was ecstatic about playing for the first time with one popular band, and he jokingly explained to me, "Child, I switched into this band after playing with for many years. Last year I joined them for a bit and with some of my friends who were visiting and played here. And if you see Bullerman, they were in their little hot shorts in the front of the band, almost to say, look, we here. So this year I paid for my costume in full, even got a designer friend to add more feathers, and boots, accessories, everything already purchased. So when I hit the road, it have no holding back." Charlie was also surprised that he could tiff a little wine on a boy in the band. While for Lister, the road was the time when, to quote him, where I could meet all my friends and dance up to the sweet music. Additionally, they also agreed that choosing a band with a reputation for having more gay masqueraders was a sure way to have as much fun as possible in a safe environment. So while on the road with Keegan in 2015, he was decked off in a large headpiece, and he pointed out, "You see me, I safe right here in this band they call. It have one or two little butchers and fish who will throw talk for you, like look at Bullerman. But when they drink the rum, them two is mellow down." And I think that these accounts tell a very illuminating story of how gay men engage in world-making practices and continuously extend boundaries of sexual agency in seemingly heteronormative spaces. While these conversations emphasize that gay men can display their sexualities openly, one cannot be negligent to accept that these activities aren't policed in these spaces, forcing many people to conform to the dominant heterosexual norms of the day. However, as these men have shown, a subversion of normative heterosexuality is possible through the strategic networks accessed at Carnival time. So while in Trinidad and Tobago, like most of the Anglophone Caribbean, is touted as dangerous for gays, especially gay men, these stories nuance the blanket expressions of hostility that gays seemingly endure in the region. And these anecdotes expose the limits of conceiving of non-heterosexual reality solely in terms of its aberration. To conclude, I return to the idea of transgression and resistance in Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival. I argue that a new approach is necessary to usher in new conversations about expressions and acceptance of non-heterosexuality. Today I explore the ways that carnival spaces and places encourage world-making practices among gay men who are able to exploit the merriment of the season and actively participate with their gay friends. I also considered how these spaces become a vehicle for gay men to exercise sexual autonomy as they transgress societal expectations about heterosexuality. Through carnival tourism, gays are afforded a space to celebrate their identity in a public arena that is otherwise policed. I think about these through Nixon's argument that when Caribbeans abroad travel back home for visits, they are participating in tourism as different kinds of tourists. Nixon's provocation is important for new accounts of touristic experiences, as it shifts attention from the consumption of a Caribbean paradise to engage in a more broader analysis of the often unheard of terrain of gay culture in the Caribbean. Today, I suggest some of the ways that gay men offer other possibilities and sites of resistance through, to quote Nixon, vexed relationships among tourism, diaspora, and sexuality. So these men expose the ways that Trinidad Carnival tourism fuels an industry that gradually shifts boundaries of respectability and acceptance. I hope that this work will begin a much needed conversation about gay tourism in the Anglophone Caribbean from the vantage point of regional gay male tourists, to disrupt notions of a seemingly homophobic and stifling region. I seek to move beyond limited accounts of sexual repression in the islands to consider how dominant heteronormativity is resisted during times of revelry and festivity. Although the research revealed that the region's exoticization is inescapable, it also demonstrated the ways for maneuvering within the carnival space as the accepted other in Trinidad and Tobago. What these men have shown is that carnival tourism facilitates a transgression of boundaries that allows gay culture to thrive during the festivities. This is an important phenomenon, not only for gay locals and tourists, but also for academics and students seeking to expose the limits of heteronormative and heterosexist ideas about Caribbean sexual identity. In keeping with the theories of resistance, I close by saying that calibrated resistance, what Nixon calls organized resistance, occurs despite a persistent homophobic philosophy about non-heterosexuality in the region. This work presents an alternative perspective. These moments provide an agential space for the insertion of Caribbean queerness into the cultural fabric of the region. The landscape of gayness in Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, therefore, offers a critique of the present by casting a picture of what can and perhaps will be possible in the not-so-distant future. Thank you.